Good day, liberators and fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. I want to clarify a lot of grey areas in the new amendments to the Schools Act of South Africa, the so-called BELA bill that everyone has been talking about. Now, specifically, according to me, a lot of lies have been spread about the BELA Act. And a BELA Act is basically just a basic educational law amendment act that were promulgated. So it's not a independent bill. It was just a bill to amend the Schools Act above others. But in any event, now I'm also a homeschooling parent. So the homeschooling issue was quite key for me. But from the beginning, when I've read through the BELA bill, as it was called still then, when it was still under discussion and consideration, I went through it, and I must be honest that I didn't see anything bad about the amendments proposed. In fact, the actual act, the changes that it made to the Schools Act, was of a much better quality than what was proposed in the bill. Because, for example, in Section 51, it used to not make provision for the fact that after 60 days, if the head of the Department of Education have not come back to you about your application for to get permission for homeschooling, then after 60 days it's considered that it was successful. The original bill did not make provision for that, and that's quite an important amendment that took place. But the fact of the matter is that when you compare the new Section 51 with the old Section 51, they have put in a lot more processes, but I do not see that it was intended at all to restrict homeschooling. I, in fact, believe that when you read the entire National Schools Act as it is now, then you will actually realize that they want to encourage homeschooling if you can, because the state does not have the infrastructure and the funding to have all our children in public schools. So if there are other ways in properly educating our children, they are actually supportive of that. So I do not think that it's a way of specifically restricting homeschooling. But then there's a very important thing, that there's no obligation, people, that you have to register for homeschooling. There's no obligation. Although the Act says that you must, the only restriction or the only penalty that you can eventually have is by way of criminal prosecution, not sending your child to school. But it only becomes a criminal offense if you do not have good reason for keeping your child at home or not sending him or her to school, and you've defied a letter warning from the head of the Department of Education. So only after you've received the written notice, the written letter from the head of the department, only then it might be a criminal offense. So what I am telling people is that, people, if you have good reason, religious, protection, security-wise, health-wise, whatever the case may be, probably a list of not sending your child to school, to a public school, then you should be satisfied that there's no reason in law that you can say that you are not adhering to the law, because then it's a valid reason. So only when the head of the department gets your name and realizes that you are homeschooling and you are not on their books as a homeschooling parent, only then after a written letter, and then you also can challenge that letter. So only after the challenge of that letter lapses, and you've done the review and all the processes that's included in the BELA Act at this point in time, or in the Schools Act, sorry for that, but after the amendments, after you followed all that, only then you might be criminally prosecuted. To make provision for the 5% of instances whereby parents are in a divorce or in a divorce or separation issue, for example, or a family feud or so, where the parents and adults are actually using the homeschooling as a weapon against the other person. In those 5% instances or so that is happening, I tell people, go and register. Go and register your child for homeschooling, follow the procedures, and there's no issue with it. The other problem is that, it's basically the BELA amendments basically targeted the governing bodies of the schools, and they were specifically targeting the rich and famous type of schools like the Afrikaans Hoër Seunsmeisies and Waterkloof and Garsfontein and all those big Lani schools. They were targeting them because rules and policies for that school were actually meant to exclude the communities in their specific areas. So you had a situation whereby 90% of the people or the children in that area were unable to actually go to that school because of the policies in place there to restrict them from actually attending that school. And now the government, the BELA Act, has basically opened it up and said, no, you cannot do things like that anymore. You have to accommodate the community in the area of the school first. And then there are also a lot of dispute resolution processes and appeal process and stuff that they have included in this process. So they haven't grabbed the power from the governing bodies. It's only in worst case scenarios where there's no compliance whatsoever, then the state will come in and say, okay, we're taking over. But under normal circumstances, there are quite a process to follow first, but it was specifically targeting, as I read the amendments, to target those types of schools that were actually unreasonably preventing children from the adjacent area to actually go to those schools, which I totally support. I'm not supportive of the government, but in this respect, I think it was, honestly, it might have been a good thing. There's always, when I read these changes, I always read it from a legal perspective, because I see that there's a lot of rights, many rights that have been given to you that you can explore to fight any unreasonable action from the government side, much more than they were before. Then in respect of homeschooling again, those of the parents who have applied before 24th of December when the BELA amendments came into operation. If your application has been done under the old provisions of Section 51, those provisions still count. So if you have sent in your application during that period, a year, 2 years or so before the time, and you haven't received any feedback or so, then you can consider that approval has been made there. There's no obligation on you to reapply if you have already received permission, because it was done under the provisions of Section 51 as it were before 24th of December 2024. So I don't see any, I would not, if you have applied under that act, even if you have not received any feedback, it is considered that application has been lodged under those principles and not under the new ones. Follow the old ones. The guidelines that are apparently busy being discussed by the Department of Basic Education, it's a bunch of bull, really. There's no provision. What I'm telling homeschoolers is that you are actually pulling on your own stoop by participating in the guidelines. If the minister have the right to have regulations for homeschooling, then the regulation should have been issued when the amendment came into operation on the 24th of December. So if there were no regulations, then it means that there was no necessity for regulations for homeschooling, or alternatively, that the processes, the approval processes and the enactment processes of those amendments have not been considered properly, because then it wasn't done sufficiently to get information for regulations that they now appear to be drafting with these guidelines. So they are telling homeschool parents that they have to participate in this process of giving guidelines. There's nothing in law to say that please help with that, but now they just want to then probably convert that into regulations and then say that, okay, a public participation process was not required because the homeschool parents agree to these guidelines and the regulations through participating in the guideline process. So my opinion about that is that just get confirmation from the Department of Basic Education what the purpose really is of those guidelines. And then the organization Pestalozzi Trust, that's always pursuing these things, and also before the BELA Act came into operation, they were part and parcel of AfriForum and Key to say that they're going to challenge the constitutionality of BELA. On what basis? There have been much more mechanisms put into these amendments to safeguard people that you can pursue. But just because we automatically assume that everything that the ANC government is doing under their clock is bad, just like the ANC, and I'm not talking anything good about them. I'm just saying that we need to be careful for narratives that's being pushed that eventually will turn around and barf at us in our faces, because just like there are several still segregation time laws on the books that are sufficient today to use. So everything the previous regime did have not been bad. Just like everything the ANC is doing is not automatically bad now. But unfortunately, when narratives are pushed, and Pestalozzi Trust have actually got a personal interest in making people scared, because they are then they are forcing people, coercing people into becoming members or paying members of their trust, so that people can be protected. But there are so many safeguards currently going on. I don't know what the actual reason for the Pestalozzi Trust is. Honestly, for as I understand from homeschooling parents, they haven't done actually anything to actually protect the rights of homeschoolers. It's only in case it's going to become a problem. But they've got a personal interest in making people scared, because otherwise people will not support them. So people have to weigh up and say whether it's going to be beneficial to support the Pestalozzi Trust, because every time when they come on board, we're going to challenge the constitutionality of the BELA. But on what basis? Why do you want to challenge the constitutionality if the BELA Act have actually introduced much better safeguards, much better dispute resolution processes than they were before? I think under these circumstances, and please differ with me, comment and differ with me, but I honestly, from a legal perspective, I don't see any problem with homeschoolers specifically. Firstly, I would say that there's no basis in law to force you to register your child. So I would only register my child if my child is not registered yet, when I do receive a letter from the head of department. And if they do not have your particulars to write you that letter, then why bother? Deal with it at that point in time. Make the application then if you really want to, or challenge the letter to say that you don't have to register under these circumstances, and deal with it then. But I don't think that people should be scared that the government is going to have the police on your doorstep the next day, because it's not a criminal offence as yet, unless you're at that stage where you have already received a letter from the department, the head of department. Only then you can say, okay, there's a possibility that I might be criminally charged. But remember that even if you are, at that point in time, the state still has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you were at the intent of bypassing the act or committing a crime. But if you now have good reason, religion-wise, etc., according to you, and you believe in those reasons, there's no way in which the state can then find you guilty on a criminal charge at that point in time. Just my opinion. So people, this is just in a nutshell of what I believe from the BELA. I think that there have been a lot of fear-mongering, but from a legal perspective, I honestly do not see red lights. And those few that there are, I don't think that it cannot be overcome, or there isn't any way around that one can pursue at the end of the day. Any homeschool parent, if you've got any legal issue with your homeschooling, Liberty Fighters Network commit ourselves free of charge to your service. So we will assist you free of charge. You don't have to be a member of us and pay us a fee. We will come on board and assist you, as we always do in our cases, with your predicament, and we will assist you free of charge without expecting anything in return. Thank you very much for listening. Make your comments down underneath the video. Consider becoming a member of our channel to get more detailed input about BELA, as I've explained now, for our channel members. And otherwise, become a subscriber to our channel, and consider a voluntary donation of your choice. That helps us to continue doing what we're doing. God bless. Until the next time.
Liberty Fighters Network.
Liberty Fighters Network.